down over on TikTok. Um, I don't know tonight. Like, I just don't care tonight so much about specifics or particulars. So I'm going to kind of just random tonight a bit. I don't have anything in the background. I figured, we just play a little bit. Um, so we're here. It's been a pretty interesting day. Been doing some weird shit. I posted a couple videos. You got to see me dress up in Scandinavian 900 roughly. Uh, and go party last night. Just been. Uh, I'm working on. I'm working on a lot. I spent more time today doing videos on TikTok than I wanted to do, and did a video in response to somebody. Um, and I'm trying to make sure that I can figure out ways to get everything to kind of coalesce and go forward in a positive way, so that it's all together in a positive way. If you are unaware, the In Widda Ord on a Right to Life is on the website inwiddaord.com, uh, to for free, so that you can download it as an ebook for free, so that you can read it if you are unaware, and if you were looking for that content. Um, I've been trying to work on other things that I have going, and maybe put a little bit less into this, I guess, just because I have other things that are very important to me. Like I wanted to make sure that I had ways to grab attention, so that books could be seen and things like that. So um, I'm trying to make sure that I'm getting that other part of the aspect of who Uh, not who, but how I utilize who I am to create and to forward us as a species, forward humanity. So I'm working on that a little bit too, and just back and forth. Uh, you know, my name is Sarah without an H. I know that recently one of the videos showed it with an H, and so I've gotten Sarah with an H a lot recently. And I am a Widda. A Widda is a it is the feminine half of the druids, or those who study the sacred feminine among the druids. Wid means knowledge and da means feminine. It and Drew means oak, and or wid again means knowledge. Druid. uh, and they were the scholarly class, the druid and the Widda of the Celts, and they were the educated. They did the science and the medicine, and they taught people. And I use that terminology to identify in non-colonial terms. I'm globally mixed indigenous, and I follow many of my ancestral paths. Uh, I use that terminology from my kind of obvious Celtic ancestry path. Oh, thank you. I haven't been on late. Like I've been signing off usually around 10 o'clock for 2 nights a week, but I'm pushing it back to 10 p.m. to midnight. And then I'm pushing the AM ones back to 8 a.m. as well. Or Sundays, 10 p.m. to midnight. I think Wednesday, I'm still on like 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And that's Pacific Standard Time. I was answering a question. What the hell are you talking about coming into my live and yelling at me like that? Like, I mean, come on, really? Uh, so I teach basically. That's what I'm doing here usually is teaching. And tonight I'm a little bit loosey goosey, I guess. I don't really like, it's not the thing tonight. Like I'm not particularly concentrated on any one subject. I also kind of like thought it might be interesting to see what happens if I don't put up a picture behind me, if that doesn't like drag in a lot of people. So I thought I'd try that. Um, Can I give a synopsis of my topics? Uh, a lot of times I teach paleoanthropology, different species of hominids that we lived alongside, different species of human, Homo species that we lived alongside. Hey, Rosie. I give support and knowledge to Indigenous people of where Western science is finally giving value to Indigenous voices so that they can utilize that. Um, and I can and I teach decolonization of European heritage. So, how to take your European ancestry and find the indigenous space that you might be from and the indigenous ancestry that you have so that you can decolonize and return to indigeneity without appropriating other people's cultures, right? Um, Uh, so that's what I do and why I'm here. I have a website, widdaord.com. You can join Discord off of that. Different things like that. If you have different questions to ask, I guess maybe we should just really kind of touch on one of the topics that we just don't really touch on a lot, and that is Widda and Celtic ancestry. Right? Let's maybe do a little focus on Celtic ancestry. Um, Now, I want to be specific that there are current Celtic indigenous groups who are fighting against colonialism, trying to get rid of foreign occupying governments within their space. The Cymraeg, Wales, the Cornwall, I might be pronouncing that wrong, Cornwall, Ireland, and Alba, Scotland, are all working to overthrow foreign occupation governments. And there are also, many other indigenous people within Europe who are currently working to overthrow foreign occupation governments. And because there are many other spaces, I don't have a mod in here. Well, I probably have a couple in here. I'm not sure where, or how active. There's like 300 people in here, so it's a little hard. I just went ahead and turned it to subscriber only. And I'll turn back on a regular comments later. That's what we tend to do when it gets a really shitty trolling space in here. I really don't know what I do that attracts trolls so much. But apparently trolls are attracted by me. I'm like troll bait, I swear. Anyways, so there are many indigenous groups currently in Europe that are currently fighting colonization. These are a couple of the Celtic ones that I mentioned. Sami people are also currently fighting for an occupation. Well, foreign control of their occupation because Scandinavian people have been in certain Scandinavian areas at an equal length of time that Sami people have been in Scandinavian areas. They just stopped living in concurrence and uh, unity and harmony, and stopped being kind about it, right? Whereas Sami people are just asking to have their space and to be able to live their indigenous lifeways. And Sami are still living their indigenous lifeways. Many people don't know Sami have teepees. Like that's not something that a lot of people know that the Sami actually have a teepee. That is their the way that they live. Like that is one of their very common housing situations. Is basically the same structure and style. And I'm sure that it does not have a lot of the same ritualistic and elements of uh, plains nations within the United States or Turtle Islands that they're like the ritual element with lodge poles and how they're put up and stuff like that and how they're tied. But Sami have teepees. Like there's so much evidence of the fact that the indigenous Turtle Islanders were actually still able to be active with Arctic people. And this is really one of them. Um, but there are a lot of indigenous Celtic groups, to back to the Celts. There are a lot of indigenous groups still fighting against foreign occupation. And I would never want to try and teach somebody how to reconnect to those spaces or try and teach somebody how to dictate to people in those spaces what indigeneity for those Celtic groups is. I think that that would be as out of my lane and as rude as trying to do it with other cultures within Turtle Island that I have ancestry within, right? Just because I have ancestry there does not mean that I should be able to dictate how groups of people actually interact, right? So I won't focus on those, but I can tell you different ways that you can find your ancestry, find how to see which group of people that you belong to initially or before, something within the colonial aspect of Europe coming to Turtle Island or going to other spaces and removing you from a diaspora or into a diaspora, not from a diaspora, into a diaspora. Um, and to kind of get back to those roots. Uh, one of the really big things, especially if you have some form of European ancestry, is to understand that most European groups actually root in very few original nations. The Celtic nation really covers pretty much the lower western half of Eurasia. So, pretty much everything from above the Mediterranean over, like Byzantine easily over, is all Celtic as long as it's on the lower half. And then the upper half, you get the Germanic groups, and then you get the Finno-Ugric descendant groups, which are the Sami and the Finns. So not saying that the Sami and the Finn are the same group. They are two separate groups. And they actually, their languages have changed a little bit. And this Finno-Ugric language is actually a little bit closer to my understanding to the original Finno-Ugric, Proto-Finno-Ugric, correct? But you can see that across the lower half, most peoples that ended up settling along the lower half uh, root in Celtic ancestry. We see that the first people outside of Latins and the Etruscans that the Romans decided to kill off uh, are the, sorry, second, got distracted. The first people that the Romans decided to kill off, besides the Latins and the Etruscans, are actually Keltoi. Hey, beautiful daughter, are actually Keltoi. And so, because of that, we absolutely see that the Celtic people really have that indigenous space going back thousands and thousands of years. I do, again, if you're just coming in, have it on moderator comments only because even without pictures in the background, it got trolly as fuck. I'm not sure why. I'm attraction for trolls, troll bait. But so when you're looking at the lower half of the Celtic, or not the Eurasian continent being mainly Keltoi people, what you're seeing is that, and Keltoi again is a Roman name for the people that they are killing off. We should never trust fully the sources written by people who are killing people about the people they are killing, because nobody writes positively about the people they are killing, right? So we see that the Celtoid people, again, as named by the Romans, really cover that lower half of Eurasia, Western Eurasia. We also see that we get the Gauls, which are a Celtic group, and the Celts, and we see this early separation. We also see that as they're migrating along, um, it's not necessarily always DNA that migrates. Sometimes it's culture that migrates, though there is influx of new DNA that comes along as well in different phases through. A lot of times that you're going to see that this really has to do with either traveling or merchants, right? Our idea that we've been really isolated and never traveled more than a mile from our home is really very recent. We actually were very global and very travel-y, and it's not unusual for you to see somebody who has really traveled around the entirety of Western Eurasia or has made it from Scandinavia all the way down to North Africa, even in early periods. And this is tracked by the fact that we can see culture moving. And if we can see culture moving where we don't see migration move or genetics moving, like the Bell Beakers, which we've talked about before, which you see a Bell Beaker in a Germanic group, and you see a Bell Beaker that is Celtic down lower in the Iberian Peninsula, and you see a Bell Beaker group over in Britain, and none of these Bell Beaker groups are related by DNA, right? So this is an influx and a movement of culture. And so we see that this movement of culture really comes from that idea of as I travel, I sell my stuff, or as I travel, I show you the cool things that I made. See what I got? See what I got? You might want this new cool thing. Hey, look what I invented, this really cool way to like cord my pottery, right? This would be the corded ware group, right? So when we see this, we absolutely see that there is constant influx and constant movement and constant back and forth and constant like this, right? And as we're looking, we're realizing a lot of times within archaeology that there is this, and we've probably all seen like these couple of new finds that just came out of Britain. One of them is this idea that they think that they finally have decided, which I think is just, I have my opinions on this. They have finally decided that the hunter gatherer groups in Britain might have had enough leisure time to have beautiful markings on their weaponry. Uh, Leisure time actually gives you the ability to decorate things, right? And we believe that people don't start really decorating their tools unless they have leisure time, right? But we also seem to believe within archaeology and anthropology, even though we have plenty of studies that prove completely opposite of this, that groups that are hunter-gatherer groups don't actually have leisure time. We actually find that hunter-gatherer groups actually have more leisure time than farmer groups. Anybody who is farming and actually static and stay static, right? Wait, static doesn't move, right? Anyways, anybody who is staying in one space and farming that space actually has way less time for leisure than hunter-gatherer groups do. And they actually seem to have way more food surplus within hunter-gatherer groups than you find within farming communities, especially early farming communities, and especially farming communities now where people like to throw out the surplus so that, there isn't surplus because people won't pay for it, right? So we actually find that hunter-gatherer groups actually have more leisure time when we look at this as an archaeological and anthropological look. And we have so many studies on this, but constantly they are saying things like, "Oh, we just decided that hunter-gatherer groups in Britain might have leisure time," right? Um, so there's this amazing new study or new find that is showing that it's possible that the hunter-gatherer groups in Britain at 10,000 years ago had enough leisure time to develop the idea to decorate their weaponry, and finding some very beautiful weaponry. We also, like today or yesterday, just came out with a discovery of actual tunnels underneath Scotland. Again, this is another thing that does not surprise me. I've known for decades that they early tin mining was done in Scotland and Britain. Like Britain, it was the wealth center of tin in the Bronze Age. Britain had the best tin in the world, and Britain had the greatest abundance of tin in the world in the Bronze Age. These are Stone Age tunnels, I believe, or maybe they said end of the Stone Age. And so this is a little bit cool and new in the fact that they're actually tunneling in what doesn't look to be a mining aspect, right? Um, we're not exactly sure yet what the tunnels are. This is something we're seeing on LiDAR, that we're seeing on radar, right? This isn't something that anybody's really dug down in, so we don't really know what they do yet. But we do have development of or usage of metals before we get to the Iron Age or to the Bronze Age or to any of these ages, right? And the reason that we have these is we have these in jewelry. We actually have plenty of metalwork here in Turtle Island before Europeans come here. People want to say, well, it was just Stone Age. Well, this is because most of their tools were used with stone, because flint is actually an extremely sharp, extremely good tool, right? They didn't have a need to, kind of pollute things and destroy things to make a tool that actually isn't sharper than flint and is in very many ways inferior to flint tools, right? And definitely inferior to obsidian tools. But absolutely the need to use metal to create jewelry, right? Or to decorate oneself. And we absolutely see that here in Turtle Island pre colonization, right? So finding tunnels in Britain in the Stone Age could absolutely mean tunneling for living, or it could absolutely mean tunneling for metal development, right? In a country that is one of our earliest spaces that we actually see, or in a land that is one of our earliest spaces that we actually see mining for elements to create metals with, right? Um, when you're looking at trying to figure out what your specific ancestry is, if all you know is that your ancestors are coming from that lower half of Europe, then you can pretty much gain the idea of a Celtic tribe. If you are coming from a space like Britain, you need to understand that you are likely to have Celtic ancestry, but you might also likely have Anglo-Saxon ancestry, which is Germanic ancestry. You might have a good mix of both, right? You might have both the Celtoid ancestry and the Germanic ancestry, just because of the fact that we are looking at about 1,500 years of colonization by Anglo-Saxons of the Celtic people within Britain. But the ancient Celtic people are the indigenous people of Britain, which means that The Khmer people are indigenous, the Kernau people are indigenous, the Albanian people are indigenous, right? So when we see that, we want to make sure that if your ancestry is something like English, you know that your ancestors come from England, but you don't know anything beyond that, how long they were in England, where they were from in England, what part they might have been. You can decide to go with either at this point, or you can decide to go with one. If you are not for certain of things, learning about this culture is not a bad thing. As long as you've traced ancestry, like say you've traced your ancestry to England, but you do not know if this family line was originally Celtic or originally Anglo-Saxon, right? Germanic, right? Um, you can you can do a couple of different things in this situation. Myself personally, I would probably go with Germanic. And the reason that I would probably go with Germanic is because Germanic also has indigenous space. You can deal within the indigenous space of Germanic people, the pre colonized Germanic space. The Germanic people move over into England and Britain at this time, mainly because they're trying to escape the Romans who are colonizing them, right? So we're looking at a people being colonized who are escaping colonization. They don't do the best. We also, in a lot of spaces, have this understanding that when we're looking at DNA, it looks like the Anglo-Saxons coming over are mixing with the Celtics. It's not like a replacement. It's not like a genocide and a replacement, right? It is more of a creating communities and then the communities interflourishing until we get to the point that the Anglo-Saxon kings start deciding to unite and we get to England as a whole, Angles land as a whole, right? So we absolutely see that this trace back can include both. Myself personally, if I did not know, I might go more Germanic just because um, claiming to be a part of an indigenous group that you're not a part of is not acceptable, right? And if I don't know for certain that I'm a part of an indigenous group, then I'm not going to claim it, right? The Germanic people having colonized this space, claiming the Germanic of this and tracing their indigeneity seems, in my thought process, to be more honorable because we are looking at the invaders of the space that we are in, not the indigenous people of the space that we are in. So it's not likely that one is more likely, right? But at least in looking at this, you're not taking from the people that are marginalized in that space, right? So if the people in that space are the Keltoi people, then you're looking at the marginalized group within that space, and you don't want to take from the marginalized group within that space, just because that in of itself is that kind of in my heart dishonorable thing. So if it was me, that would be my choice. If you find that maybe certain aspects within your family make you think that maybe it was a more Celtic thought process, absolutely go with that, right? If it resonates with you, absolutely go with that. Or, like sings. Like if you go out and you're studying between these two things and, you know, Freya makes no sense to you, but Brigid does, then follow the goddess that makes the sense to you, right? Um, in something like Britain, it is extremely likely that you are one and both, right? Like it is extremely likely that you're mixed both Germanic and Keltoi descent. I think that I'm getting like hit on my Discord over here. I do know I have messages in my Discord I have not looked at. Um, excuse me just a second. Yikes. I know I'm putting you up on the top there. Um, So when we are looking at spaces outside of that, if you're looking at the lower half, you're probably likely to be able to look at Keltoi. If you're looking across the upper half of Western or Eurasia, what you're looking at is going to be Germanic of descent. You can go to places like GED Match, your DNA portal, and get actual breakdowns if you have DNA that will give you actual, like the actual Celtic groups or Germanic groups that you belonged to. You can do this in Your True Ancestry or mytrueancestry.com will connect you to grave sites, so archaeological sites that you can trace yourself back to the ancient Picts if if you have that connection. These things can break this down if you have the money to spend and you have the DNA. It can even break down the kind of piece of meal DNA test that Ancestry or 23andMe is. Once you have decided what group it is that you are following, is now the time to start looking at the different aspects of that group. It should be understood that some things are close practices, even within groups that you have ancestry within. A close practice is a practice that is spiritual in nature or has some connection with the structural culture system, like maybe like a war bonnet is a close practice because a war bonnet is a purple heart, right? A war bonnet is a valor thing, right? A close practice is something that is either spiritual in nature or something that is connected to some form of honor within a community, right? If, say, I have Celtic heritage, okay, um, I may not want to practice. Well, no, I know that I do not want to practice close practices such as seining. Uh, Seining being, to my understanding, a specific practice within Scotland and Ireland. And this practice within the Scottish and the Irish Celtic people, or descendants of Celtic people, uh, actually has a lot of depth to it. It is not just smoke cleansing being something that is pretty global and cross cultural. Um, Not only does it have a lot of depth to it and have different elements to it, but it has a deep spiritual connection with it. So, unless somebody is teaching you how to do it correctly, if you do it incorrectly, you are going to screw it up. And that connection with your ancestry is going to be problematic. So, you want to make sure that you're not partaking in practices that are closed. A closed practice is a practice that belongs to a culture that you haven't been taught, you are not a part of, and you haven't been taught that culture. Even if you're a part of the culture, if you haven't been taught a closed practice, you don't want to use it. It's dishonorable. And as you're reconnecting, being dishonorable to ancestry is not the way you want to go, right? Um, but you are more than welcome to connect with a lot of elements that are cross cultural, like smoke cleansing or like understanding the trees or the roots systems that go through and the connection that we as humans should have with that, or the animistic culture. And you are absolutely more than welcome to get into the more national cultural thing. So the Celts are a nation that has many different tribes within that nation. Tribe being a family group, right? A group based on familial lineage, whereas a band is a group of several different family groups. So we see that the Keltoi people are the Keltoi nation with several different tribal groups within the Keltoi nation. Specific tribal groups are going to have specific things that they practice. And the reason that specific tribal groups are going to have specific things that they practice is because that's specific to their indigenous area. If I don't have white sage in my area, I'm not going to use it. On the other hand, if I have European sage in my area, absolutely going to use it, right? Um, if there are a lot of wild lions in my area, I might try and tame them. As opposed to if there are a lot of wild boars in my area, I might try to farm and husband them, right? Different groups are going to utilize their indigenous areas in different ways. Some things are across all of them. So within the Keltoi nation, different tribal groups are going to utilize their indigenous areas in a different way, but they're going to all worship the trees. They're going to all use smoke cleansing. They're going to all use circles, spirals, triple element. They're going to all believe in a tree of life. They're going to all be brightly decoratively colored. Gold will be something of importance and silver will be something of importance. lunar calendar will be something of importance. And these are all very cross cultural. The deer are something of importance. Associating your self with a different animal group is absolutely something of importance. We absolutely see within the Celtic people and within the Germanic people that there are evidences of the belief of shifting from animal to human. Oisin from the Colin legends, from the Finianan cycle, right? Oisin is the child. Oisin means little deer. Oisin is the child of Shiv, Shiv being a deer who is able to morph from a deer to a young woman. And in her young woman phase, she is taken advantage of by God, and her child born from that is Oisin, who is also able to shift from a deer to a child. The Selkies shift from seal to human, right? And this is where we get our Celtic legends from. So you absolutely see this idea across Celtic culture of the being able to kind of shift from an animal being that you might associate yourself or your group of people with into a human form or back. The swans from the so the swans come in several different legends. I believe they're in the Mount Manan legends, the Alaman legends, and there's also swans within the. I'm trying to make sure that I'm not conflating a story of the seven brothers who were turned into swans with Lu of the Silver Hand. But my belief, if my memory serves, is one of the reasons that Lu of the Silver Hand doesn't have his hand. One of the reasons given, I believe one of the reasons given is battle, but I believe one of the reasons given is in being switched into a swan. When he was switched back, the hand was the one thing that didn't switch back, but I could be wrong. Like, so we see though that there is this transference from swan into human being. There is a lot of this transference between animal form and human form within Keltoi uh, history, animistic thought process. We see the same thing in the Germanic. We often think of it without understanding, or thinking of it when we think of berserkers, because berserkers are thought to have shifted into bear form. They get this adrenaline rush, and it is this battle fury that is thought to actually be the bear spirit taking over who they are, right? And there's several other examples of shifting in animals with humans within, famously, Loki and how Sleipnir comes to be about. But so there's plenty of examples of this. So you're going to see that this is a Celtic cultural thing and a Germanic cultural thing. But it is a cross Celtic cultural thing. You're also going to see that another cross Celtic cultural thing is going to be matriarchy. And I had a conversation with somebody today, and they were talking about a group of people who was focusing on trying to create a matriarchal structure. And they were talking about ensuring that there were no cishet men within this space, in the leadership space. And I had to point out that that's not matriarchy. Matriarchy allows men to lead. Matriarchy, like patriarchy, does not assign gender roles to leadership positions. What it does is trace family lines and put your top knowledge gatherers or honor thought process or respect to a specific uh, sacred gender, right? But it does not exclude other gender. And what it does not exclude other gender, and the reason it doesn't exclude other gender is because by making one gender unable to have a voice in how they're treated, you're fucking up, right? You are making one gender less, you are causing harm. That is a toxic patriarchy. And to do the same thing as a matriarchy would be a toxic matriarchy, right? This idea that because you are a cishet male penis possessor, you don't have sacred masculinity or compassion or the ability to understand, and that only people with boobs do, is not going to really be effective, right? It really like ignores a lot of the issue, right? And it really kind of it buries its head into the sand for the issue. And in deciding to exclude that sacred masculinity, it gives that lack of ability to have that sacred masculinity, right? And sacred masculinity is important. Sacred masculinity gives us nurturing, right? Sacred femininity and sacred masculinity, the sacricity of both of them is that nurture and protect. They both nurture, they both protect. And that nurturing and protecting and that being able to do it in the beautiful ways that each of them are able to do that is the positivity. And when you exclude one, is when you enter into this toxic hellhole that we're in, right? So you don't want to flip that the other way. Um, so you are absolutely seeing that matriarchy is very, very heavy within Celtic culture. Um, I would say that not all Celtic cultures are matriarchal, but that the majority are, and that many that are led by kings are still matriarchal because what it is that you trace the kingship line through your feminine line, through your matriarchal line. So if I, as a male, was a king, my son would not inherit, my sister's son would inherit because she is my mother's child and I know that my mother's child is my mother's child, right? And that her children have that same line, especially in societies where you don't have the ability to DNA test and societies that don't try and control women to kind of ensure that they're getting their direct male line, right? You see that matriarchy absolutely can have masculine leadership, right? That's what real matriarchy is, not masculine leadership in itself, but the understanding, just like real patriarchy is, but the understanding that one specific gender isn't less and one specific gender isn't um, doesn't have a voice, right? The understanding that having one specific gender not having a voice is an imbalance. Um, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for a little bit. We are down to like 100 people in here and hope that maybe it's not going to be as trolly for a couple in case people want to ask questions on the conversation that we've been having tonight. Again, we are over on YouTube. The YouTube is in.widda.ord. Um, I have a Discord channel and all that stuff can be found on the nwiddaord.com website. Um, so that you can get to the book into the Discord and everything else. If you are on the old YouTube channel, please make sure and transfer over to the new YouTube channel where I'm doing the lives from here on out so that we can keep the old channel, my private channel, so that you're not seeing the videos my children are watching. Probably don't want to see all of the videos my children are watching. Again, tonight is a little bit more of a kind of night. Hello, Jedi. Um, and so the conversation about Celtic ancestry and finding ancestry is just a little bit of a we can talk about other subjects. I'm more than happy to. I'm just I want to go back and play my sim games. I love you guys, but I want to go play my Sims games. Right? Like I just want to sit around and get stoned and play Sims. So we're just going to talk about bullshit because I don't feel like putting my mind into something right now. But if there are things in specific that you would like to talk about, I'm definitely down. I'm going to lean to the side really quick though. See my really cool, pretty. My magic is not working. I have to abracadabra my magic so that it works properly. Sorry, YouTube. I know I'm not off camera for you. I think YouTube being in the United States and knowing what state I'm in, it's a little bit less. I mean, I've seen people smoke on YouTube, so I'm not as worried about it as I am on TikTok. Trying to get to my shit. Irish Gaelic is a beautiful language. I've learned a little tiny bit. I used Duolingo to learn a little tiny bit, though I learned a little tiny bit from books early on. It is a dying language, right? Like it's currently being revived, but Gaelic is, a language that has been almost dead, right? It had to be revived. So Absolutely, I think learning it is great. I actually find learning ancestral languages is really important. I have tried to learn at least a little bit of several because I think that that in and of itself is really one of those ways to truly speak to your ancestors in ways that they would understand, right? Yeah, that's true. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I thought I'd see what would happen if I didn't have a picture up in the background. Like, and we were at like 300 when we first started. I was really surprised, but I thought I'd see what would happen if I didn't actually put a picture up and see if we, actually still got some numbers in here. You came up with a DNA helix design for tattooing or something, Sunlight. That's awesome, Jedi. Yeah, spelling is difficult on that. Hey, Haterade. What part? I've lived in pretty much every single part of Washington, so I probably know where you're at, or at least nearby. Thank you. This is my office. This is where I do my stuffs. I have a beautiful roll top desk that a friend gave me, and I've got lots of cool stuff on it. Little bits and pieces of artwork of my kids or my own, and a little bit of collectibles that I kind of sit with when I do work. And like some bookshelves, and then the background is all like there's some of my stuff and some of the kids' stuff, and then pictures and no. Those photos there are all from a book of famous women around the world. Like women who did amazing things. Like there's Hedy Lamarr up there, Boudica's up there, uh, Lozone's up there. I was like, I know that's not Matoka, but Lazone's up there. Dolly Parton's up there. There's a few different famous women, Mata Hari, who have made great strides. I forget the names of some of them. I didn't put out the names, and so I can't give you all the names. Those over there are Chillins. They're not ancestors. Those are all Chillins. And then that goddess up there in the top center was something somebody gave me for Mother's Day. There was a beautiful woman sitting down in the middle of Pioneer Square where I live, and handing out photos. And she saw me and she said that one was the one that she thought I should have for Mother's Day. It is a total goddess. And my son loved it. He was with me at the time, my youngest. Free energy work. There's been a couple times I just went down and did energy work. And then just like you can see that like my diploma's back there. One of them, the handprint in the center is my youngest child's art. It's really fantastic. He did it at 10, and it's like really high, like the lines. You can see veins. It's pretty awesome. His middle name is Da Vinci. And then this was done by my oldest child. If you're on YouTube, I'm pointing to the moon. It's in a different space on TikTok. This is done to my oldest child. You can see kind of hell slightly sideways there, done by my younger daughter for Christmas this year. And then there's a book called Unnatural that my youngest or older son wrote that's in the typewriter there. So just different things. Uppity Woman book series. Take a look. Oh, Woodinville. Oh, let me see if I can place that. I think that's on the coast, but I'm not positive. I don't think I know that too well. I'm sorry, that's one I'm not familiar with exactly where it is. I put my hell portrait up, my darling love, and then she fell down. So she's sideways right now. This is hell. She was over here behind Caden's Unnatural. Really, what I need to do is just pin her to the wall. Let's do that really quick. See my ring light. It did not work the way I thought it was supposed to work. This is because I am old and do not understand technology. Or function, apparently, some days. There is how. She is put it up. She is put it up. Woodinville sounds. Well, I was thinking like peninsula, maybe a little bit below the peninsula, but it wasn't a Bothell. Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. Wine country. I do think humans are still changing. I don't think we're going to like evolve into another group because, like, I mean, I think we're going to evolve, and we are absolutely evolving, but like speciate into other species because we don't isolate and because we've kind of had abilities to adapt our adaptation, so we don't need to so much. Ellensburg, I like Ellen. I've lived in Ellen, well, near Ellensburg. Why, thank you, Jedi. I'm on in the morning too. At like, well, I pushed it back till 10 a.m. Pacific Standard. Wednesday nights I am on at 8 p.m. instead of 8 a.m. So that might be a little bit easier. So that's like 11 your time. I do not believe humans originally lived for 120 years. I don't think I see any evidence of that. Um, there's not a lot of long-lived species on this planet, anyways, right? And why would we have a long-lived species that actually can proliferate as much as we can, right? It wouldn't seem smart. Like evolutionary, from an evolutionary standpoint, it would encourage overpopulation. What do I mean we don't isolate? I mean that like groups of us don't isolate. Genetically, we don't isolate. You're not going to see that a specific group has no influx of admixture from other groups. For the like 100,000 years it takes to speciate into another species. You have to be genetically isolated from the rest of your group, and have a like 100,000 years to get into the next stage, like where you're a separate species. And we just don't do that. We do isolate a little bit, like the Sentinelese. If the Sentinelese stayed where they're at for the next 100,000 years and we did not influx with them, they might speciate, right? Thank you. I didn't say that there were none. I said there are not many. And whales and turtles and elephants all live semi long lives. Um, sharks, I think, live long lives. Um, maybe alligators live semi long lives. Parrots live long lives. Right? There are some, but there are millions of species on this planet, and you could count on your fingers and toes how many species live over 100 years. Right? So, yes, trees are absolutely a long-lived species. Absolutely, trees are a long-lived species. But trees are not as prolificate as humanity is, right? Um, and that's the other point, right? And like turtles aren't as prolificate. They have a lot of young, like their eggs, like they have a lot of eggs, but their young don't live to adulthood frequently because of the fact that they don't take care of them, right? Uh, and they also don't have a lot of responsibility for their young, where we have a lot of responsibility for our young, right? Oh, are we there already? Okay. Yes, I will do that for you guys. Sorry about that. We'll take it back to that. Um, I'm sure your great grandmother passed at 115 years old. People are living really long these days, after over 100 years. I'm not saying it's not possible now. I said we didn't start out that way. That's it. I said we didn't start out that way. And I said we didn't start out that way because evolutionarily, uh, for evolution itself, for the planet itself, it would not have been the best idea, right? To have a species that is proliferate as that proliferates, has as many children as we do, or the ability um, to I think my baby's watching my live. I just got a text said he liked my shirt. Um, hi. So, anyways, to have to be as proliferate as we are, and I'm probably saying that word wrong, but have as many children as we do, um, and to live over 120 years as an early species means that our populations would have been larger, right? It just doesn't seem right, right? And I would say that yeah, it just doesn't flow within it. Why we are living longer now is because we've done things. We have created the ability to live longer now. And I don't always think it's healthy. I mean, don't get me wrong. Kudos and congratulations to people living over 100. If I live over 100 and I do it without being in pain every day, kudos and congratulations to me. Um, but I don't think it's healthy for society as a whole, right? I don't think that having a bunch of people who live extended periods of time or a bunch of people who, are living in pain or ill health all the time, something that our current state actually does quite a bit, is actually the healthiest way to be. Personally, for me, as a biome dynamic, that does not mean I'm encouraging calling the herd. I think Mother Nature does that just fine on her own, right? But I am saying that we get in Mother Nature's way sometimes in ways that we probably shouldn't. So if we talked about Celts, we could talk about the Germanics next. And again, I'm not going to give you like all details because we're not going to get into deep. I would say with the Celts, one thing that you should understand is that we don't know all the Celtic gods. There's a wide variety of Celtic gods. Nobody's been able to name them all. Some of the most some of the stuff that is closest to the time of the colonization of groups of people by Christianity and therefore might be a little bit more accurate. The Mabinogion is something that is very close that describes some of the Celtic lifestyles. Again, though, the Mabinogion is a Cymry, Celtic, Cymric, not Celtic, Welsh. So it is Celtic, but it's specifically the Cymry or Welsh peoples. So you want to make sure that you're not taking like any specifics out of it. But I believe that it's got some good documentation of some God thought processes. But they do believe that there is such a wide variety of gods within the Celtic people that it's been hard to nail unbound. Another really important thing about the Celts that is often ignored in society, and often I like to point out, the Celts are a really great example of why written history is bullshit, and why oral history is more accurate, and why using written history is actually more able to deceive and is actually more capable of looking for a specific word, is actually more likely to create memory retention issues for people. So, first of all, we know that there's been studies that have happened recently that have shown that things like Google and the ability to Google it actually has decreased our memory retention rates. Memory is a muscle like everything else. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And they've proven this in several different ways. But one thing that they've done is over a couple of hundred years shown that the more that we use reading to catalog and maintain our information for us instead of cataloging and maintaining it um, into our brain, we see that we lose that ability to catalog and maintain it within our brain. Um, with this, we see, not supposed to do that, I'm sorry. With this, we see that when you're looking at groups of people pre-written language, or what Western thought identifies as written language. We're absolutely seeing that groups of people have written language, but they choose not to use written language because of the thought process that written language decreases memories. And the Celts are one of these peoples that knew this. The Celts have written language. This is Celtic written language. Ogham is seen in many Celtic spaces. This being Ogham, this is Irish Gaelic for speak out, written in Ogham. Um, and we see that Ogham is in many Celtic spaces. For a while there, we thought it was just Irish Celtic only, but we do see it in Scotland. We see it in Cymru. We see it in several different Celtic places. Ogham is something that goes in many different Celtic groups. What we see with Ogham is that Ogham is not used for retention. Okay. Ogham is not used for documentation. Om is not used for teaching lessons, things like that, right? Om is used for messages, right? Om is used for marker stones. Om is used in and often written on trees or basically just notched into branches, which is why it looks like this. So this is supposed to be down a central branch. So if this is your central branch, a piece of twig that you have um, a twig that you have picked up off the ground, you're going to mark it with these markings. Um, and you can see if you get up really close, if I get up really close, that there are actually, and I can't point to them because I can't see them, but there are actually some that are only on one side, and that there are some that cross the whole thing. It starts and ends with the chevrons. These chevrons start and end sentences, and there is actually this break right here that goes across. That's a small singular line that breaks up the words. So this sentence between the chevrons with the marker to break the words is two different words, speak, and it goes from bottom to top. Okay. Speak out. Okay. And we see that might not be the marker. Maybe it's up here. I know that there's a little line marker somewhere on there. Anyways, so we see in this that the Celtic people absolutely have a written language. The Celtic people don't use this written language because the Celtic people believe that by using this written language, they'll lose memory. They will lose education. They will lose knowledge because when you put knowledge on branches, it can be burned. When you put knowledge on paper, it can be lost. But when you retain knowledge within the human memory, it cannot be lost. When you retain knowledge and pass it along, it cannot be lost. And we see that the Druids and the Widda, okay, are the educated in the scholarly class of the Keltoi society. And when the Keltoi society has this educated or scholarly class, what they do within this class is all of their science, all of their medicine, all of their law giving and keeping, advising, right? And all of their teaching, as well as their priesthood, right? Their worshiphood, right? But it is all of these things, not just your communication with the gods. And in this teaching aspect, you see that the lower levels of druidry or widowry are going around to different communities and they're teaching. And this is done in specific manners. So the Keltoi people are using a three-line stanza, and that three-line stanza is spoken in a way that the lyric of it, the iambic, the way that the syllabic measure of the words is actually increases memory retention. And what they do is they teach each of these stanzas, and once you've learned that stanza, then you learn the next, right? So if I'm going out and I'm teaching the kids in the village, I might just do a 9-line poem every time I teach this specific group of kids. Think of like maybe I take all the toddlers, preschool age, right? And I gather them together during the day so that their parents out working, and the different members of the community, maybe the grandparents that are watching them get that break, right? And I sit them around me and we're talking and I teach them this poem, right? This song, often done in song when you're that young, right? That gives them that ability to memorize it. I don't teach them a whole lot. But if I see somebody who's really curious, right? When I see the kids that are really bright, those that are always asking why, around 7 years old, children are sent into fosterage in Keltoi culture. Many early cultures do this. And what they do is you'll go and live with your aunt or your uncle, or you'll go and live on another farm, or maybe you'll go and foster to the royalty, right? And in this fosterage, you're learning the skills that you need for your life, right? If you're going to be a warrior, you might foster to somebody who is a warrior. If you're going to be a steward, you might foster to somebody that's a steward. If you're going to be a farmer, you might do that, right? This fosterage thought process is not a removal from family because they consider community family. And not only is it not a removal from family because they consider community family, but it's understood that, well, you might miss your mother or your father, that you're going to see them, and that you're having these interactions on a regular basis. This is done in another reason because it's easier for you to discipline sometimes children that are not yours, to instruct children that are not yours. And children that are not yours sometimes will respond better to people that are not you. If you're a parent, You really know the feeling of, God, they're such a brat for me. How are they treating you so well when your friends or your friends' parents tell you how great your child is? And you're like, I'm so glad they're great for you. I wish they would treat me like that, right? This happens commonly in parenting, and fostering actually helps with that. With the Celtic people, if somebody is showing that aptitude for wanting that greater knowledge, at 7, when they would go to foster somewhere else, they're going to foster with the Druids or the Widda. And in that fosterage of the Druids or the Widda is where we take these 3-line stanzas and take them into memory retention. Before this is learning the simple things, learning the laws of our land. This is going to be sing song. This is going to be in short bursts and poetry. You might be able to quote that 9-line stanza for the rest of your life because you learned within that 9-line stanza to leave the cat and the dog to lie at the fire because we should not wake sleeping animals, and to ensure that you put out milk for the spirits in the morning, and to, ensure that you never harm another man. And in that 9-line stanza, you're getting these 3 laws that you're holding with you through the rest of your life, right? And you're starting it at 3 years old, right? So, because you're hearing it year and year and year, you're getting that. But if you have that greater quest, if you have that why, you become fosterage to the Druids or the Widda. And in that fosterage, you take that 3-line stanza into, I've learned this 3-line stanza word for word. We like to think as oral history is a telephone game. It is not. The telephone game is where you put a chain of people together and one person on one end whispers into somebody's ear, and that is passed through whisper. Nobody hears it. Nobody can repeat it back. Nobody learns it. When I go to you and I state, let sleeping animals lie, for disturbing their sleep is disturbing their spirit. Let sleeping animals lie, for disturbing their sleep is disturbing their spirit. You are 7 years old. You learned these 3 lines. This is your 3-line stanza. Once you have learned and can repeat back to me several times, let sleeping dogs or let sleeping animals lie, for to disturb their sleep is to disturb their spirit, right? Once you've repeated this back to me and you have learned this, memorized it, I add the next 3 lines. Disruption of the spirit of an animal is disruption of the spirit of nature. Disruption of the spirit of nature is disruption of humanity. Disruption of humanity is disruption of the biome. This time, maybe you're like, 2, 3 weeks in, you've learned that first 3. So now you know, let sleeping animals lie. When we disturb sleeping animals, we disturb their spirit. When you disturb the spirit of an animal, you disturb the spirit of the biome. When you disturb the spirit of the biome, you disturb the spirit of humanity. When you disturb the spirit of humanity, you disturb the spirit of all of us. So when I've learned these 3 stanzas, or these 2 stanzas together, is when I move on to the next one. I don't move on until I've learned them. So when I'm passing them on, they're word for word what has been said for the last 10 generations. Okay. And this also ensures that we're not getting deception through history and knowledge. It is not one person changing the story from the next person, from the next person. Homer wrote, and then somebody translated Homer's words, and then somebody translated that translation. The Bible is written in Hebrew. Well, actually, the Bible is originally written in Torah and Aramaic, right? So the Bible is written in, an ancient language that's been translated, that's been translated, that's been translated, that's been translated, right? We don't often look at the direct translations. If we did, we would know that nothing in the Bible says anything about homosexuals. It says don't be a pedophile, which we should all be able to agree with, right? And certain groups following that don't actually obey, right? So we absolutely see that written language can be twisted, washed, changed, whereas oral histories and traditions that are taught by groups that abstain from writing for memory purposes or for history purposes or for knowledge of tradition purposes absolutely have a closer understanding and a truer and more accurate understanding, and therefore oral tradition is absolutely more correct than written tradition. Yet another reason we should believe Turtle Island Indigenous people about their own fucking histories. I'll turn them back on for a couple minutes just to give people a chance and to give me a chance to slip to the side. I only got like a little bit last time. I'll deal with that one in a second. Okay, so not sure if we're getting any questions, if there are any questions. Pretty, are you still over in YouTube? I know I turned it off as subscriber onlys. Limericks, absolutely. Absolutely, like limerick and rhyme, that lyrical thought process of language. It's also where we see a lot of our early things like poetry, our early Celtic poetry, and our early. So most of the early So like the sagas are like a poetic thing, right? They're the poetic eddas, things like that, right? Because they're written in poetic form initially. And the same thing happens with early Celtic writings when you see that translation comes. So when you get to like the sagas or the Mabinogion, what you're looking at is something that is that is set down by somebody who has lived for a couple hundred years, or I think the Mabinogion is 50 years after Christianity takes over the space. But what you're looking at is groups that have already been Christianized. And so what they are translating is Christianized thought, thought that has taken the traditional Celtic thought or traditional Nordic thought and then morphed it with the Christian thought, right? Which is where we see Odin become the All Father. He was not the All Father before this. Um, Odin wasn't even the leader of the Nordic gods before this. Thor is actually thought by many to be the actual leader of the Nordic gods. So when we are looking at this, we're seeing that a lot of the later day traditions that we see in epics, in sagas, in the poetic tradition within, oh God, the poetic tradition within the Cymry is very, very old and very long and very well known. The poetic tradition within Ireland is absolutely where we see those historical tales originally being written down. And some of those original stories that we do know of come from that poetic tradition as well. So, absolutely. Thank you. I rather like it. Um, I think that this one comes from my grandmother Bay, uh, who is my father's mother that I didn't find until like 2020. I found my father in 2020. Um, and I found my father because his grandmother looks almost exactly like me. And I have a picture of her from 1920. And I dressed 1920s and I was like, holy shit, that's me. And everybody that saw it said, oh, that's you. And I looked at it closer and I don't think that I have her nose. I think I got the nose from her daughter-in-law, actually. But I rather like this nose. Thank you very much. I agree. It's a nice nose. Funnily enough, my baby sister, who's my half sister and is half Scottish, actually has this very tiny petite nose that I've always loved. And I thought it was such a cute little nose. And I thought when I was younger that my nose was not my favorite nose. I wouldn't find out until I was like in my 20s, late 20s, early 30s. And she was like, I always loved your nose. I wanted your nose. And I was like, I wanted your nose. I find things like that amusing. We always think that somebody else has it cuter or looks better, or somebody else is prettier than we are, but that other person is often thinking that we're prettier than they are. The pic got the pic in the YouTube, is it slower over there? Is that what you're saying? Um, so we've gone over Celtic people. Um, any questions on the Celts? Any questions? Anything that you're dying to know? I mean, I can't say that I know everything about the Celts, but I do have a little bit of knowledge. They are people that I stopped studying a while ago, really, when I moved into the Nords, but the Nordic groups. But I did study for probably a decade and a half, 2 decades. Okay, cool beans. So I absolutely have a deal of knowledge. I can't say that I'm an expert, but I don't really claim expert on anything either. Like, I have my focuses and I have things that I know some information on, but uh, jack of all trades, master of none, oftentimes better than a master of one. The full quote is important. I would rather master or semi-master several than master one. Let's see. We do see tattooing actually goes back really far uh, across the globe. We actually see their oldest evidences of tattooing within a cave in France that's about 35,000 years old. I've heard dates that put it at 18,000 years for the tools, but I've heard dates that put it at 35,000 years for the tools too. And this is in a cave in France. So we do see that tattooing actually goes back in all of us quite far. We see that it translates across the globe probably at the same time that we translate across the globe. This is our current earliest evidence. It's actually a single point flakes that have a single point needle that have residue from inks and blood on them. And so these are tattooing implements. Uh, 35,000 years ago in France. I mean, that's really early in our migration leaving Africa, right? So we're looking at, we've been out for maybe 15,000 years at that point. So we really haven't done a whole lot of dividing. And again, we're still in that mix of always being in that mix. Um, but we absolutely see that tattooing goes back that far and is pretty cross cultural within this space and in other spaces. We look at different finds uh, across archaeology, and we know that Otzi is in the European Alps. So we're also looking at another example of tattooing going back, I think it's 5,000 years. I've heard 8,000 years. It kind of fluxes sometimes. Uh, so and this is between Austria and Italy. So we're absolutely at Europe again for tattooing. We also see, and in this space, does become either the Italians or the Celtic people, right? That space between. See that this is Celtic Europe, right? Demonstrating tattooing. Interestingly, about Otzi's tattooing is many of them are long points that we know today of as acupuncturally healing points, using lines and dots that we know today actually work as healing within tattooing. And the pigments, the inks are made of burnt herbs that are specifically effective for the ailments that Otzi was suffering from. And so they're actually tattooing these herbal medicines into his skin at 7,000 years ago, right? Um, we also see that the Pictones and the Picts are documented by the Romans as tattooing themselves from their scalp to their toes with what is described as needles and the juice of the woad plant that gives off a blue ink. So the Picts and the Pictones are in the Iberian Peninsula and the Picts are in Scotland. The Picts and the Pictones are both tattooing themselves from scalp to toes with blue woad ink. So we do see that tattooing is within this culture going back to the origin of this culture, right? That the Celtic people are absolutely having the ability to tattoo themselves. The Romans don't describe a lot of other tattooing that I know of. And I'm not sure if this is something that is within every tribe within the Celtic people, but we do again see that it dates back prior to the Celtic people within this area, which would tell us that you're likely looking at something that does come across cross culturally, right? I want to make an important note here. Patterns that are associated with specific groups of people are always appropriation of culture. So, well, you can tattoo every inch of your skin if you want to. If you do chin tattooing in specific patterns that are related to specific indigenous groups within the Turtle Islands, you are appropriating indigenous culture. Uh, if you do chin or lower face tattooing in specific ways, like the Ainu people of Japan, then you are appropriating an indigenous culture. Um, just like it's okay to braid your hair, but if you braid your hair in patterns that are specific to people escaping the slave trade, um, then you are appropriating a culture, right? That were developed for that escape route, right? Then you're appropriating a culture, right? So, well tattooing is global. Well tattooing belongs to all of us. Well tattooing from your scalp to your toes belongs to all of us. Using specific patterns in specific areas is extremely inappropriate. And by patterns in specific areas, I do not mean that you can use a pattern that is specific to a people in an area that is not specific to them. I mean, you can use a line anywhere in your body, but if you use lines on your chin in ways that are specific to indigenous cultures, that is specifically cultural appropriation. Uh, if you use the patterns that you see within Polynesia that are actually historical records, their histories of their families, and you put that anywhere on your body, it is cultural appropriation. So, this is important. A, it's important that we don't appropriate culture. B, it's important that we understand our own, right? Tattooing is okay. What you tattoo is important. Tattooing has, for our entire existence, really had to do with documentation of expression of self or group um, and connection within that space. Uh, and that in itself is why don't appropriate people's culture, right? Because even when we take it back to painting our faces with the Neanderthals, right, or with early Homo sapiens, we excuse me, absolutely see that this is expression of identity of self. And if you express your identity as somebody else, you know, it's highly inappropriate, A, and really kind of icky. So, absolutely. Well, and that's not a close practice, right? That's not tattooing a Scottish clan that is your ancestry isn't a close practice. There's not tattooing of clan history within Scottish history. There might be tattooing within Scottish history, and there might be tattooing of family history within Scottish history with the Picts. But the Scots who have created the clan O'Neill, and actually, I think O'Neill is Irish, isn't it? Isn't it O'Neill Irish? Yes, because U is Irish. Sorry, but the Irish who create, or that line, uh, the design that is there today, right? That is associated through it today is not the one that they would have tattooed on themselves if they did it before, right? Yeah. Sorry, the Neil part, and I was thinking because there is Neil in us. Oh God, I want to say there's Neil in Scotland, but I could be wrong. There is also a lot of cross cultural there. And that's if you understand what Scotland's history is. So Scotland's history is a Celtic group, the Picts, the Caledonians. But then another group of Celt comes up and lands in Ireland. This group actually brings an Egyptian princess with them, Scotia. And Scotia, who is leading this group of Celtic people and specific Celtic men, um, Scotia takes them across into Scotland, and she takes over, and it is that result that ends into Scotland as we see it today, named for Scotia. Uh, this takeover of the Picts, but it is by another Celtic group. So what we're seeing, I mean, it's absolute colonization, right? It's a single group of people from Scotland, or not from Scotland, from a specific group of Celts led by an Egyptian princess, by the documentation of the Irish and the Scottish that are coming up. And it's a specific, like it's a ship, like it's not like 20,000 people, it's like 20 people, right? And then they take over in Scotland. I believe that they actually take a group of Irish with them when they go over, if I remember correctly, but I can't remember for positive. And that is where you get that foundation of Scotland. Again, another Celtic group coming in and colonizing, right? Uh, so you're going to see that you might see different takes on it, right? But you're also going to see that there's a lot of that cross path, right? And again, that goes back to you all being of the same nation as well. I think late at night when I am I think I'm getting like my sleep pattern was late for a minute there. I was able to stay up late and come wake up early or wake up late, but I'm back on like an early sleep schedule for some reason because my body hates me. It's been doing this for like 10 years now. And I'm late nights, and this is for some reason late for me has been more problematic lately. Yeah, actually, I believe Nova Scotia is actually supposed to be New Scotland. Uh, a lot of them are. What am I drinking? Green Goodness from Boathouse. Thank you, Emma. Absolutely. Nothing happens, and then I get into a live, and all sorts of messages are popping up. Thank you. I'm trying to stay awake, is what it is. My body is like, I hate you. You should go curl up in your bed. Welcome. I love how on YouTube you can see like this part, and you can see that it's really gray. My partner was pointing out to me the other day, he's like, Oh my god, it's everywhere. It's no longer salt and pepper. It's really pepper, isn't it? Or really salty, isn't it? Like, I know, I know, I know, I know. So our current understanding with the Basque is that they're an isolated group for the last few thousand years, but they're coming in the same area in the same time as everybody else comes in. But instead of going up, like so, as the ice recedes, excuse me. So as the ice recedes, after the end of the last ice age is when we see humanity currently, like Homo sapiens sapien, moving out of the Levant area and doing this kind of final move out of Africa. Not that it stays final, like people still go back and forth, right? It's always very global. We're always very global. But as the ice is receding, it starts around 50,000 years ago. And as it goes up, we go up. So we know that it hits like the Britain level at about 30,000 years ago. And then we know that it hits like the Scandinavian level at about 8,000 years ago, 7,000 years ago. I think Scandinavia is 7,000 years, and Ireland is 8,000 years. So this is how this ice is going up. And as it goes up over this period of roughly 40,000 years, we move into areas. There's a groups that go up and go east, and then they go west. This would be the Finno-Ugric language groups. And then there's other groups that go straight up and they stay. And then there's other groups that go straight up and they stay and they go over. And so our understanding is that for the most part, you see that first flush out goes up and slightly east. This becomes the Indo-European. Proto-Indo-European really goes all the way over into India. And so because Proto-Indo-European language really goes all the way over into India, we can also trace this through DNA. We see that this group goes up and kind of over and stays there, and then it goes over into Europe. And this is where all of current modern Europeans are coming from. But before this, because they go up and over here, before this, we see a couple of groups that seem to go over under. So they go over like the Black Sea area. Some of this might not even really be there as sea, but they are able to get over to the lower portion a little bit earlier. We see actually at like 27,000 years ago, the Solutreans that are often talked about with the Wabu stuff. Uh, the Solutreans are actually one of the first people that we see of Homo sapiens within the Iberian Peninsula. And the Solutrean group within the Iberian Peninsula is roughly 27,000 years ago. So this is our earliest group, really, in the Iberian Peninsula. And we see that a portion of this group stays. What they understand with the Basque is that they are never part of that Eurasian steppe culture, uh, Anatolian farmer culture that comes across later. And it is that culture that kind of goes up and east and then kind of stays in this area and becomes early farmers and then steppe herders that moves over later that everybody else is kind of descended from. And so the Basque stays in this space. There is some different movement through. We know that the Y DNA that is picked Y DNA that's specific to the Picts actually comes from like Turkey, where is the highest concentration of that Y DNA, and that it comes across and over and it stops in the Iberian Peninsula. This might, to my thought process, be the Pictones because it's in that space. But we also see it currently within the Basque population within that peninsula. So it could also be that group of people, though we don't see an association with the Basque and the Pictones. What it could be is that the Pictones that stayed in that area also have that Y DNA that mixes in with the Basque who are already there within that area, right? Because it is just the Y DNA and a small percentage that we're seeing within the Basque people. But this is a possibility. But the Basque have kind of pretty much stayed within that space for this time. It is not that the Basque, it's not that they're like a different, like a species or something like that. They haven't been there that long, right? When we're talking about you have to have isolation for like 100,000 years to really become a separate species. They haven't been isolated for that long. They've been isolated genetically isolated is what we're talking about. Not like you never talked to anybody, but like you never ever met anybody, right? So they haven't been genetically isolated for more than like 5,000 years, and it's not complete genetic isolation. There is some admixture that is coming out. Well, they not only have their own language, but the Basque people actually have some differences to their bone structure. We like to talk about phrenology as if it's a fact, and it's really not a fact. Like you can't tell if somebody's Asian or if somebody's European or if somebody's African based on the structure of their skull. You can see some averages, but those averages really are still seen in every other culture. And this is why phrenology is a pseudoscience and it's been debunked. And within the Basque population, it's not that it applies, it's that we know that on average, Basque people have like a thicker skull. The bones are thicker. On average, the Basque people are shorter and stockier. And on average, the Basque people, to my knowledge, now, mind you, this is information coming from a Basque person themselves, what they were taught by their family, somebody that I was close to in my 20s. And so I have not studied the Basque people, so the skeletal stuff is stuff that she told me because this is what she knew from her family and the structure within her own body because of this. But there's like, uh, I think she said there was an extra rib, but I'm not sure if she said there was an extra rib or it was like a space. But and they're also like, there's a there's another difference, and I can't put my finger on it at this moment. I think I've spoke on it before, but I can't remember what it was, right? But what we see is that these might be adaptions that we're getting out of isolation, right? For 5,000 years. It takes 2,500 years for an adaptation to happen. And these adaptations, might go back a little bit further because this group might be a little bit more genetically isolated even longer than that, right? So it's possible that, that's where that comes from. This is what I know with the Basque. I don't know a whole lot, right? This is just what I know. A couple of different things I've seen. A lot of people like to relate Rh negative to the Basque, but there's not. It's not actually our highest percentage of Rh negative. Our highest percentage of Rh negative within any population is about 19%. And currently, our highest percentage of Rh negative within any population at 19% is within like four different populations in different spaces across the globe. And the Basque are not one of them. I think within the Basque, it's like 0.3% Rh negative. So a lot of people like to associate Rh negative with the Basque, and it is not associated with the Basque. Um, they're just a group that's been there for a minute, right? They're indigenous. They've been there for a hot second, and they've been able to fight off the colonizers because of the way that they're isolated, because of their space, right? And not completely fight off the colonizers because the Basque were very much harmed by the Spanish people who came in and colonized, right? And the overtaking of the church, right? I think I have heard of Ancestral Brew. That sounds familiar. If you want to tag me in one of his videos, I might have. I'll let you know if I see. The whisper effect with communication is fascinating, especially with tech. Do I sound like I'm whispering tonight? It's not meaning to. Is that better if I turn up my volume? So you say when I say, I'm assuming meant would I say, because I don't, I've never said that. In the near future, there will be a technology that allows us to sleep less. I don't know. There might be. I don't know technology very well. It's not really my thing. In fact, I'm really bad at technology. I might be a little nasally tonight. Hey guys. Hello, 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 hello. Oh, okay, okay. Oh, okay, that makes sense. The verbal passage, like the like, yeah, I get it. I don't know crap about I don't study DNA. I don't study the way that DNA works. I don't study the way that genetics work beyond understanding how you can trace familial lines. Like I don't understand or like how they pass. Like it's not my focus. And DNA is confusing to me because DNA is a long word that makes no sense. Like DNA is R1B A53. It's several different letters and numbers in combination, and they don't syllabic for me, so I can't. I'm an archaeologist and an anthropologist and a historian and a storyteller and a teacher, and a healer, and, I'm a Widda. That's why I use Widda because there's just too many different things to describe it, right? It's a I don't know. What do you think? I mean, like, you're like the 4th person. They're really on my nose tonight, aren't they? And badass. Actually, I have a pair of socks that says I identify as badass, and my partner's siblings insisted on buying me these socks when I met them. I didn't meet my partner's siblings until 2022. We went back east to Mississippi for his father's passing. And we went to Beale Street. I've never been, and like my daddy grew up in Memphis. The dad that raised me grew up in Memphis, and Beale Street was like an important part of my understanding growing up, but I had never actually been. And so going to Beale Street was just like ugh, for me, like this is ugh. And when we were talking back at his father's house, uh, w- my partner is a badass. Like my partner holds titles and belts, right, for fighting, and they're very badass. And we were joking and talking, and I'm like, but I'm the badass in the relationship because we're talking like this is the spring of oh no, it's maybe early 2022 or late 2020. Anyways, so it's 2022, early 2022. I had been off of the streets for maybe a few months, but I had spent all of 2020 and 20 this earliest part of 2021 protesting. And so I was like, but we know I'm that's like the third front line I've stood in this world. And so like I was like, but we all know I'm the badass in the relationship anyways. Like I'm the true badass. And I was fucking with him because I don't fuck with people well. And so I'm trying to fuck with people better. And so we go to Beale Street, and when we're down there, there's this pair of socks. It's like orange and bright, and it says, I identify as badass. And so they bought me these socks. So I have these little socks that say I identify as badass. So I don't forget that. Yes, uh, 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 I stood like 10 feet off of the street. Um, there's a spot that has all this writing. And what's the phrase is not hitting my words. And I'd have to sing the song to get to the phrase, but it's like it's standing 10 feet off a beal or something like that, and it says it over it, and then there's like butterfly wings behind it, and then we got it. Like listen, the drummer that died recently, that was just hugely famous, who worked with every artist. He was playing at the Blues Cafe on the corner, BB King's Blues Cafe, and so we got to listen to him. And this was like 3 months before he died. Like it was right before he died. So it was really Taylor something or another, and it was really really cool. It's great. A blue suede shoes and a board on the plane. Touchdown in the land of the Delta Blues in the love pouring rain. I'm kind of particular about it. Like this is from a company in Europe, and it's all handcrafted and hand hammered. Uh, it's the only one that I wear. Like I've tried other ones, and none of them like fit. And I was really, really careful about making sure that anything I got was something that could be very cross-cultural in its expression, right? Not get any patterns or anything else that would be particular to any culture. And so I like this one, and I like silver. I'm not a gold person, so that's why I use this one. Um, and I like, I mean, oh God, it must have been 21. Must have been 21. No, it was 2020. I got it in 2020. I got it in 2020. Two of my very close friends, we decided to go get pierced together, all three of us, and one got their nipples and one got their belly button, and I got my nose. Piercings are one of our oldest forms of expression of self, just like face painting or painting a body is, right? Using ochre on your body to paint and decorate yourself. Piercing with bone and piercing. Uh, from what we understand archaeologically, we're seeing piercing that looks like ears and nasal, or nose, septum, or even lips, all the way back into the Neanderthals. We see bone needles in the Neanderthals would absolutely be that, right? Just the shape of the needle, you can absolutely see it because it's pierced on both ends, or like it's point on both ends, and it's just like you would use today in a straight piercing, right, or a slightly curved broad piercing. Um, we see feathers used a lot. We see shell used a lot. Um, so these things go back so far within us that they go back to a different species, which means that they're kind of cross cultural. Uh, and really rooted in us, right? That need to express your identity to everybody, that need to show everybody who you are up front, that need to not have to tell you what and who I am, but let you see what and who I am by this, right? I think the nose tends to hurt less, at least the ones in the side. I've had these done several times in my life. Um, I've only had the lower ears done, and I was so young when those were done, I don't remember. We have always been creative individuals. We absolutely see that really it is our advent into creativity that we see as that switch into humanity, right? Like we can show that so creativity comes from why, right? It's that questioning, right? And that means science. So science is really that creative thought process that goes why, okay? Um and that expression of it. So we can show that going back to Homo erectus, so 2 million years, right? We see that actually going back to Homo habilis in the first tool making, right? But we start to see expression 65 to 70,000 years ago with Neanderthals. Um, and it is in that expression that we really start to see an understanding of something out of us, like not like the idea that we're not just one of the animals really starts to come into play. that idea that, and it doesn't really separate us yet. Like we're still very animistic in our thought process, but like this idea that there's something else. There's a purpose, there's a reason, there's a deity, there's a reason for being, right? And we see the idea that there's an afterlife start in this as well, because this is where we start to see our burial at the same time frame. Our first burials outside of Home on the Lottie. Home on the Lottie is our cool. And we don't know everything yet. But so we really see our first burials at this time, and we see our first self-expression of painting of body parts, painting of different things, and wearing of jewelry at this time, right? And in these things, in this mix, in this is where I believe we see the start of the change of our brain development into what we are today, right? Into this highly, what we want to think of as highly advanced group of people, right? That comes from the shape of our brains. It doesn't come from the size of our brains. At least this is what we currently believe. And please remember, everything can change tomorrow depending on what they decide to come up with tomorrow, right? But currently, we believe that it is the shape of our brains, not the size of our brains. Seeing as Neanderthals had larger brains, and we're still stuck that they were not as intelligent as we were, because we must be the most intelligent. Our egotism kills us all the time. Anyways, so that understanding of an esoteric, of a something more, of an identity and a reason and a why, right? That understanding is where we see the start of burial, where we see the start of cave painting, where we see the start of self expression, where we see the start of decoration of self, right? And it is in that understanding that we see our sense of community, rooting, right? Our sense of space within community, our sense of space within culture, our sense of culture itself, our sense of society. It's within that we see all of that starting, right? And this goes back to our roots. This is who we are, right? This is how we get that extra step. Um, if we think that we are the advanced, that we are the pinnacle, that we are the best, which we tend to, right? We're very egotistical. Might be one of the things that we're only us do, right? The egotism. If we think that we are in some way important in a pinnacle, then we must understand that this importance is intending and caring, right? In our ability to adapt our surroundings and to tend our surroundings, right? Thank you. It's like green goodness stuff. So Neanderthal were here way before us for about 300,000 years before we came along 300,000 years ago. Absolutely. Within that time frame, though, the concept to our current understanding for art hadn't developed. There's no current understanding of an evidence of burial. There's no current understanding of an evidence of uh, decoration, right? Self decoration. Um, so it is our understanding that these things don't start within any group other than currently changed Neolati, right? Within any group prior to roughly 60, 70,000 years ago, when we see that start happening. And then we believe that our brain becomes the shape that it's at now, roughly 30 to 40,000 years ago. So that to me tells me that it is that shift in understanding that starts that change in the shape of our brains, excuse me, or is a product of it. So within that, um, what we're seeing is that yes, they were around forever, but that understanding hadn't developed yet. Again, we see the first of that though now in Naladi. And that stuff can all change tomorrow, right? Just like 2 months ago, I would have told you. I had to remember when it came out. 2 months ago, I would have told you that, the first evidence of any form of burial or any form of art or any form of ritual is in Neanderthal at 60, 70,000 years ago. Now we know that Homo naledi at between 235,000 to 335,000 years ago. So, roughly the same time that we're developing as a species and in the same space because the naledi are in the Rising Star Caves system outside of Johannesburg, South Africa. Um, so, roughly the same time, so we're developing as a species, we absolutely see that Naladi, and currently we know that there's like three more things that Lee Berger is going to publish over the next year that might give us some really important information. But now we know that they not only had controlled use of fire within those caves in the form of transporting like torch wise or something like that, but there's evidence of ritual, complex hearths, like oven complex hearths. Excuse me again, got a burpee tonight. And burial of dead. And not just burial of dead, but like uh, we're finding dead on platforms and evidence of sitting with the dead afterwards and fire for the dead afterwards. We're finding animals in caves in fire. We're finding fire in caves without human bodies in those caves, and we're finding animal bones in those fires. And in the caves that have human bodies in them, we're finding that there are no animal bones with the associated fires. So um, we absolutely see that this idea of ritual and of burial is coming up, and of communication with ancestry is coming up, right? Because this is evidence of sitting with dead, right? So this is at 235 to 335,000 years ago, which pushes our understanding back so far in a species that we know very little about so far, in a species that what we did know we thought was very primitive because their upper body is Australopithecine, right? So Lucy. William, you're welcome to ask a personal question. My change addiction? What's a change addiction? Are you addicted to change? We change as a species. Like that is the most natural thing about us is change. We grow. We are constantly growing. That's one of the things that um, is what we understand is why we're so intelligent, right? Intelligent, right? Because we're constantly learning, and learning means growing. So you may go ahead and ask a personal question if you like, but we'll see. And if you're avoiding change, Ronnie, I would state that that might be problematic for you. Change is the only constant. Change is more constant than taxes. Taxes are created, change is not. Oh, they're just so sweet tonight, aren't they? Um, so we're absolutely seeing that that decoration thought process comes across for tens of thousands of years within humanity, and it comes across within all cultures because it's coming across that early, right? Because it is something that we're seeing that early within humanity. It is something that we're seeing before we really see humanity really kind of diverging into different spaces. And it is like the world tree, something that we're seeing pretty much in every space and culture, right? You say atheist like it's a bad word. Oh my God, you threw it out there like you threw out lies, right? You probably tried to throw out lies and it didn't let you. Um, no, I think Joe Biden's a cancer, just like I think the government's a cancer. Around that time mean? They were probably proclaiming themselves a proud atheist. That's probably true, to be real. It's a little trolly. I thought I'd get rid of it. I didn't want to turn the comments off completely. It's not that trolly for 180. So, um, I think. Oh, we're almost on midnight, anyways. We might just take off. In fact, we are going to take off because I did say that I would make a phone call around midnight. Um, Everybody have a great evening. I will be back. What is today? Sunday. I'll be back Tuesday morning. I'm pushing back Tuesday mornings live till 10 a.m. I'm going to push back the AM lives till 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Uh, I will get that put up as soon as I close down, just so that it is. Look up Homo Nalari, William. And I didn't say elite. You put the word elite in there. Nobody said elite. Um, so have a great night, everybody. I will be back. Widdaord.com is where you can find information. Talk to you later. I will have another 8 p.m. live on Wednesday night, Pacific Standard Time. The AM live on Friday will be 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And again, Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Have a great night, everybody. Good night, YouTube. Much love, everybody. I will see you guys in a couple days.